In just 6 days, Israel accomplished what seemed impossible, changing the course of Middle Eastern history forever.
In the years leading up to 1967, the Middle East was a region simmering with tension. The creation of Israel in 1948 had ignited a flame of conflict that refused to die down. Arab nations, still reeling from their defeat in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, were determined to reclaim what they saw as rightfully theirs. For Israel, survival was the name of the game, and the stakes had never been higher. By the mid-1960s, tensions between Israel and its Arab neighbors were reaching a boiling point. Egypt, under the leadership of President Gamal Abdel Nasser, had taken a hardline stance against Israel. In May 1967, Nasser made a bold move that would set the stage for war. He closed the Straits of Turan to Israeli shipping, effectively cutting off Israel's access to vital trade routes. At the same time, the rhetoric coming from the Arab capitals was growing more aggressive. Nasser, along with leaders from Jordan, Syria, and Iraq, spoke openly about the destruction of Israel. The atmosphere was electric, and war seemed inevitable. While the military situation was heating up, the political landscape was equally charged. Nasser's move to block the Straits of Turan was a direct challenge to Israel and its Western allies. Meanwhile, Israeli leaders were grappling with a difficult decision. Should they strike first, or wait for the inevitable Arab attack? Levi Eshkol, Israel's prime minister, found himself in a precarious position. On one hand, he knew that a preemptive strike could be seen as an act of aggression by the international community. On the other hand, waiting for the Arab armies to make the first move could spell disaster for the young nation. The world watched as the Middle East hurtled toward war. The countdown had begun, and no one knew how it would end. What followed was a conflict that would last just 6 days but leave an indelible mark on history. June 5, 1967, dawned with a sense of inevitable anticipation. For Israel, the moment of decision had arrived. Facing what seemed like an imminent attack from multiple fronts, the Israeli government chose to strike first, launching a surprise air assault that would reshape the conflict in an instant. At precisely 7:45 a.m., Israeli fighter planes roared into the skies in what would become one of the most audacious military moves of the 20th century. Operation Focus, as it was called, aimed to neutralize the Egyptian Air Force before it could launch its own attack. The plan was simple, yet devastatingly effective. Strike hard, strike fast, and strike first. In a matter of hours, Israeli forces had destroyed nearly 300 Egyptian aircraft, many of them still on the ground. This preemptive strike not only crippled the Egyptian Air Force, but also set the tone for the rest of the conflict. The impact was immediate and profound. Caught off guard and reeling from the loss of their air superiority, Egypt and its allies scrambled to respond. Nasser's bold plan to close the Straits of Turan and amass troops was suddenly in tatters. The Egyptian leadership struggled to regain control amidst the chaos. Despite their efforts to rally, the Arab forces found themselves on the defensive. The loss of the Egyptian Air Force severely hampered their ability to mount an effective counterattack, leaving them vulnerable to Israeli advances. With the skies now dominated by Israeli aircraft, the ground invasion began. Israeli forces swiftly moved into the Sinai Peninsula, making rapid progress and capturing key positions. The momentum was unmistakable. Israel had seized the initiative and was driving the conflict on their terms. As the dust settled on the first day of the Six-Day War, it was clear that Israel's gamble had paid off. The airstrike had turned the tide, and the course of the conflict had been irrevocably altered. With the strategic advantage gained from their stunning airstrike, Israeli forces now faced the daunting task of fighting on multiple fronts. The Six-Day War would see intense battles in 3 key regions: the Sinai Peninsula, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. Each front presented unique challenges and opportunities for both sides. On the southern front, Israeli forces launched a rapid and relentless assault into the Sinai Peninsula. With their air superiority established, they moved quickly to capture key positions and drive back Egyptian forces. The terrain, vast and arid, proved challenging, but the Israeli strategy was precise and effective. By June 7th, Israeli forces had reached the Suez Canal, a crucial strategic point. The Gaza Strip also came under Israeli control, further securing Israel's southern border and neutralizing the immediate threat from Egypt. To the east, The battle for the West Bank and East Jerusalem was equally intense. Israeli forces clashed with Jordanian troops in cities and towns, including fierce fighting in Jerusalem. The struggle for East Jerusalem was particularly symbolic, as control of the city held deep significance for both sides. June 7 saw Israeli troops enter East Jerusalem, and the old city was soon under their control. The capture of Jerusalem was a significant morale booster for Israel and marked a pivotal moment in the conflict. On the northern front, the Golan Heights presented a different kind of challenge. The rugged, elevated terrain was heavily fortified by Syrian forces. Israeli troops faced fierce resistance as they pushed forward, but their determination and tactical superiority ultimately prevailed. With rapid advances and decisive victories on all three fronts, Israel had redefined the landscape of the Middle East. The battlefield successes were remarkable, but the aftermath of the war would prove to be just as significant. As the dust settled and the last shots were fired, the impact of the Six-Day War began to reveal itself. The conflict, which had lasted just 6 days, left a profound and lasting mark on the Middle East. The aftermath of the war would shape regional politics and international relations for decades to come. By the end of the war, Israel had made significant territorial gains. The Sinai Peninsula, Gaza Strip, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights were all under Israeli control. These changes were not just geographical. They had far-reaching political and social implications. The new borders reshaped the region, and the Israeli government now faced the challenge of administering these territories and addressing the needs of their new populations. In response to the conflict, the United Nations quickly moved to address the situation. On November 22, 1967, the UN Council adopted Resolution 242. The resolution called for Israel to withdraw from the occupied territories in exchange for peace with its Arab neighbors. While the resolution was a step toward peace, its implementation was complex and contentious. The negotiations that followed would shape the future of the Middle East and test the international community's resolve. The war's outcome elicited a range of reactions from around the globe. Western nations, particularly the United States, were largely supportive of Israel, while many Arab and Soviet-aligned countries condemned the conflict. The divide highlighted the Cold War tensions that influenced international diplomacy. The varied responses underscored the broader geopolitical stakes and the impact of the war on international relations. The Six-Day War had a lasting impact on the Middle East. The territorial changes and the unresolved issues from the conflict set the stage for future wars and peace processes. The legacy of the Six-Day War continues to influence regional politics and the quest for peace. From the Yom Kippur War of 1973 to the peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan, the echoes of the Six-Day War reverberate through the history of the Middle East. In just 6 days, the course of history was altered, leaving a legacy that continues to shape the world. The Six-Day War stands as a reminder of the complexities and consequences of conflict and the enduring quest for peace. The Six-Day War wasn't just a historical footnote. It was like giving the Middle East a major makeover. Think of it as the region's equivalent of an extreme home renovation show, but with a lot more at stake. With Israel's new land grabs, the Middle East was suddenly sporting a brand new look. It was as if someone had taken a giant eraser to the map and said, "Let's try this instead." The Sinai Peninsula, Gaza Strip, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights were all part of Israel's new real estate portfolio. Enter the PeaceProcess, a never-ending soap opera, featuring everyone from world leaders to peace negotiators. The UN Security Council became the ultimate reality TV show, complete with suspenseful cliffhangers and a lot of behind-the-scenes drama. Tune in next week to see if Israel and its neighbors can finally reach a peace deal, or if they'll just bicker over who gets the last slice of the proverbial peace pie. Negotiations were about as smooth as a roller coaster ride. One moment they're shaking hands, the next, it's back to the drawing board. It was clear, making peace was harder than assembling IKEA furniture without the instructions. And so, the Middle East's quest for peace continued. The Six-Day War left a legacy of complex issues, like a giant jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces. Every attempt at solving the puzzle has been a mix of hope, frustration, and occasional comedic moments. Think of it as the ultimate geopolitical game of Tetris. Just when it seems like everything might fit together, a new piece comes flying in, and the game starts all over again. Despite the ongoing challenges, the Middle East has shown incredible resilience and creativity. From cutting-edge technology to vibrant cultures and ongoing diplomacy, the region continues to evolve, proving that even the most intense conflicts can lead to new beginnings. The Six-Day War was just one chapter in a much larger story. As the Middle East continues to adapt and redefine itself, it reminds us that history is always in the making, sometimes with a few plot twists along the way. So there you have it. The Six-Day War didn't just redraw maps, it set the stage for a dramatic, ongoing saga of regional change and resilience. And who knows, maybe one day we'll all look back and laugh at how this chapter played out.